All right, I'm going to get us started. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our inaugural Work and Wellness Conference. I think we all know the last few years have been quite challenging on so many levels. And today we're going to spend some time talking about opportunities in order for us to help ourselves, help our families, help our colleagues, and all that affects us in our life, from our professional to our private to our downtime. Today's series of TED-style talks will give us an overview of what we all need to maintain our wellness at work and in everything that we do. So first and foremost, we have an outstanding list of partners for today's events. And so bear with me, you see them up on the screen, but allow me the opportunity one time to call them out. In fact, shout them out by name. ACI Medical and Dental School, Amazon, AmeriHealth, Association Member Trust, AT&T, Atlantic City Electric, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind, Capital Health, CGI, Citizens Bank, Davison Eastman Munoz Payon, PA, Eastern Janitorial, Eisner Amper, EWMA, Fallstrom, Fidelity Investments, First Bank, Focus New Jersey, Geneva Burns, Hackensack Meridian Health, Horizon, Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, IBEW Local 102, JCP&L, Johnson & Johnson, Junior Achievement, McDonald's, Maurice Piers, New Jersey Business Magazine, New Jersey Council of County Colleges, New Jersey Society of Certified Public Accountants, New Jersey American Water, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, New Jersey Resources, NJBIA HR Support Center, Orsted, Piper Holdings, PIM Brands, Prager Metis, PricewaterhouseCooper, Prime Point HRMS and Payroll, RWJ Barnabas Health, Sobelco, South Jersey Industries, Zago Manufacturing, and Zillow. What an extraordinary show of support for this important and timely topic. Let's give a round of applause for all those great partners. Now, a few housekeeping notes before we kick off today. There will not be any formal Q&A. All the Q&A will take place in the chat. Because these are TED-style talks, we keep them moving, but our speakers will be here throughout the event so that they can engage with you in the chat. So please provide your questions in the chat and folks will be responding. And I invite you to keep the conversation going in the chat. Because remember, like if we're in the room in 3D, we're all kind of sharing little sidelines and it really keeps the energy and momentum of the event. And I know that the speakers want to engage with all of you today. So with that, I'd like to get things started now. And our first presenter is the Assistant Commissioner from the Department of Health, Assistant Commissioner Nancy Scotto Rosado. Assistant Commissioner, the floor is all yours, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm delighted to join you today on behalf of Commissioner Persichilli. Please allow me to extend her thanks and mine for the invitation. Supporting and encouraging wellness in the workplace makes good business sense. Wellness is vital to preventing and managing chronic illnesses, reducing stress and anxiety, improving mental function, and increasing productivity. It also promotes healthy relationships, enhances self-awareness, encourages personal growth and development, and improves employee engagement. I will give you a few examples of wellness programs and services for New Jersey state employees and residents. As we all know too well, for the past 3 years, we have been living through a historic event, a public health crisis that has taken over 1 million lives in the United States and nearly 6.5 million lives worldwide. During the pandemic, we were suddenly forced to adapt to the new normal, including working from home, homeschooling children, lockdowns, quarantines, and the mandatory use of face masks in public. Adapting to the new normal brought changes to our personal, social, economic, and spiritual lives. The pandemic also resulted in a dramatic drop-off in preventative, mental health, and basic chronic disease screening and care. Among the most impacted by the pandemic were children. Even before lockdowns and restrictions began, there was a rising trend of mental health concerns among young people. Suddenly, families were confronted with challenges COVID brought to their children and other family members. Some families continue to experience the after effects of COVID, including physical and mental health challenges. The state of New Jersey continues to prioritize the well-being of our residents. We're especially dedicated to New Jersey's youth and supporting their mental health We are committed to helping our children and families get the support they need through a number of programs at the state, including the Department of Health. Additionally, the Department of Human Services provides a full array of services and evidence-based practices that support employment, education, and housing. As we expect COVID-19 to stay with us for a while, employers can promote wellness and protect employees from COVID and other infections in the workplace by doing the following. They could encourage employees to get vaccinated against common infectious diseases such as COVID, influenza, hepatitis B, and measles, and provide resources for them to do so. To ensure the surfaces and objects are regularly cleaned and sanitized, especially high-touch areas such as doorknobs, keyboards, and light switches. Encourage employees to frequently wash their hands with soap and water or use hand sanitizer, cover their mouth and nose when they cough or sneeze, and avoid touching their face. Employers can provide facial tissues and hand sanitizer dispensers. Communicate clearly and regularly with employees about workplace policies and procedures related to infectious diseases, including any changes or updates. We know that the viruses can cause lasting symptoms, and COVID is proving to be no exception. Long COVID includes a wide range of health problems that can last for weeks, months, or years. Not everyone experiences the same symptoms. However, there are some symptoms that are commonly reported, such as tiredness, difficulty breathing, thinking or concentrating, muscle and joint pain, and changes to taste and smell. There are certainly mental health impacts of long COVID as well. Time and research will tell us how long COVID will ultimately impact public health. Long COVID is real, and companies should ensure a work environment that offers a supportive culture for employees and encourages self-care and well-being. For our healthcare providers, New Jersey state employees also have access to wellness programs and services, both in person and through telemedicine. A few examples of wellness programs offered by our healthcare providers include medical therapy and behavioral telemedicine services. Online fitness and wellness programs include incentive prevention and recovery sessions, yoga, stretch and breathing, exercise programs for back and joint health, and weight loss. Telehealth and remote patient monitoring represent the future of healthcare delivery. And while they cannot completely take the place of in-person visits, they can be used to improve access to care, reduce health disparities, and costs and other healthcare barriers. In New Jersey, another wellness program we have available for state employees is the Employee Advisory Services, or EAS. It's not different from employee assistance programs designed to help employees and their dependents with personal, family, or work-related issues that may adversely impact their work performance. Staffed with professional counselors, EAS offers confidential assessment, counseling, and referral services for employees and their dependents to improve health and productivity. EAS also assists employees and dependents by providing counseling sessions for wellness and fitness, depression, anxiety, stress management, and grief. Employees also have monthly access to online resources, such as a newsletter, webinars, and other on-demand programming. Since the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Health employees have been joined by Willow, a 10-year-old therapy dog whose calming presence has helped staff cope with the challenging work of protecting and improving public health on behalf of New Jersey communities. With CDC funding, the department is also creating 2 initiatives to integrate additional therapy dogs as part of employees' wellness programs at state and local health departments. Research has shown that therapy dogs in the workplace can lead to increased social support for employees, increased employee productivity and engagement, enhanced physical health, lower overall stress levels, and other benefits. We saw that with Willow. The first initiative under the 6-month Project Willow Animal Assisted Support Employee Wellness Program includes the implementation of certified therapy dog visits at 12 designated Department of Health sites located throughout the state. The goal of this program is to foster a positive, supportive, and comfortable work environment for employees. The second initiative under development will place these therapy dogs and handlers in 1-year increments among existing staff at the state, county, and local health departments. For New Jerseyans, the primary goal of our initiatives and programs is to help all residents live long, healthy lives and reach their highest potential. Let me highlight just a few. The Murphy administration has put in place a whole of government approach to improve our maternal and infant health outcomes through the First Lady's Nurture New Jersey initiative. This initiative aims to make New Jersey the safest and most equitable state in the nation to deliver and raise a baby, with a focus on Black and Hispanic moms and babies. For our Healthy Women, Healthy Families initiative and other perinatal workforce initiatives in my division, the Division of Family Health Services, we have strengthened and diversified the maternal health workforce by training and engaging community doulas, integrating community-based health workers in maternal care, and through investments in midwifery education and training. The department is also investing in food security under the Healthy Corner Store initiative, working with small mom and pop shops to help them increase access to fresh fruits and vegetables in communities, especially in communities that are considered food deserts, creating a sustainable, healthy environments. For many older adults living on a fixed income, affordability is key. Our Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program works to improve the health and wellness of low-income seniors and promotes nutritional health by providing them with locally grown fresh fruits, vegetables, and herbs. In closing, both New Jersey state employees and residents have access to wellness program services. Through our healthcare providers online or by phone, our state employees have access to a variety of wellness programs and services. New Jersey residents also have access to programs and services, including nutrition and fitness, tobacco and chronic disease control, and even summer wellness programs. For more information about wellness programs and services offered by the Department of Health, please visit our website at www.nj.gov/health. At the department, we look forward to continuing our partnerships, not only to help all residents live a long, healthy lives and reach their highest potential, but also to build a stronger, fairer, more resilient, and healthier New Jersey. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the department wellness programs.
Thank you so much, Assistant Commissioner. That was extremely informative, and the resources that you have brought forward are very important for us to take advantage of. So I hope sure that everybody's going to check on the website and see the resources that are available to them. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you for all that you and the Commissioner are doing to continue to keep us healthy and safe here in the state of New Jersey. Yours is not an easy task these days, so appreciate your time today. Next up is Tracy Paris Benjamin, who's Senior Director, Health Equity and Community Equity for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and she'll be speaking to us today about mental health equity. Tracy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. It's nice to see familiar faces, and as you think about the topic discussion, I think one of the most important things is community and connection. As the Senior Director of Health Equity and Community Health, one of my primary roles is really focused on advancing and having discussions about things that are sometimes uncomfortable. And in order for us to receive or get to quality of care, it is imperative that we begin to have some of those discussions. So I think one of the most important things is to level set and to start with kind of defining what is equity. Depending on what, environment that you're in, it may mean different things. And I would say to any organization or leader that's on the phone, it is to define what equity is to this particular organization based on the goals and the mission of your organization. But just to level set for this particular conversation, very simply, equity is really defined as having a fair opportunity for one to attain their highest level of health. And why is that important? It's important because when you think about striving for health, we know that there are structural barriers that dictate how individuals use the healthcare system. So I'll speak primarily from my work at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, but kind of take you through a little bit of a journey. My background is that of a social worker. And what I will say is that I've worked in many different sectors. I've worked in the nonprofit setting, I've worked in hospitals, and now for payers. And one of the things that remains really constant throughout my career is very often the voice of the member, patient, client is often not at the seat of the table. When you talk about leadership and mobilizing change, it is important to have all of the experts. You need clinicians, you need, your finance folks, but you really need the voice of the member, patient, client to really truly understand the needs of the community. And that helps to support more equitable outcomes. So you have to start, I will say first, with the recognition that structural racism, implicit bias, all of these things permeate the healthcare system and really impacts the disproportionate disparities that we see among marginalized communities, primarily individuals, people of color. You have to call that out. It is so important. The need for calling that out is to not make individuals feel bad or to cast blame. It is just like the diagnosis of any condition. When you go to the doctor wants to know, how long have you had this? What are the symptoms? You have to think about developing your programs around wellness in the same way, understanding the needs of your employees, understanding the needs of your patients, clients, members. And I always refer to them in those three sectors from the perspective of where you sit. The other thing I would say is really important is to understand the impact that traumatic experiences have on individuals. So not only the presenting problem. So, if you go to the doctor, if you go to your therapist, you present a particular problem. Usually that's impacting you today. What we find is traumatic experiences, where they're direct or indirect, really kind of dictate how individuals see the world. So if you don't call out things that have been impacting individuals, let's say, knowing that the color of one's skin can dictate whether or not they come home because they may have rang the wrong bell, whether or not, someone is just at the wrong place at the wrong time, knowing that those things can impact the health, the wellness, and how someone interacts with the healthcare system is really important. It's important for an employer to know. These are the things that your employees are showing up with that you don't always see. I'll give one example. I think it's really important for us personally, and when I say us, we collectively, that we recognize that mental health is something that impacts all of us. I think a lot of times, at least I can speak for Horizon, or even working in hospitals, we would say, sometimes these patients, these clients, and when you put individuals into a bucket, what you do is you create this separation as if you are not that patient, as if you are not that client. And it is really imperative, really for leaders. A lot of the work that I do is speaking to leaders about leading with empathy and understanding that We are member patients, clients. At any point in our lives, we can be impacted, whether that's by illness, caregiver burden. And I don't know about everybody else, but this world of anxiety is just a constant. This world of depression is a constant because no one taught us how to live through a pandemic, and we're still learning as we go along. So those traumatic effects, whether it's from childhood, whether it's something you're currently experiencing, as well as coupled with the pandemic, continues to permeate society. So in order for you to reach equitable outcomes, you have to address those things. I think it's really important for employers and leaders to define that mental health is something that is normal. It is normal in the sense of needing to continue to fill your cup, needing to ask for help, needing to build communities. And I think the important piece of this is the call out that as a leader, if you are experiencing something like depression, like anxiety, it is important to call it out. Obviously, you have to feel comfortable to do so. But what those things allow is to normalize these things that we experience that sometimes I call stuff, right? It's stuff that we experience. It's not unique. And what you begin to do is you form bonds where people feel comfortable and begin to identify. I know as an African-American Black woman, there is this idea very often that, there's a strong Black woman that wears this invisible cape, right? And that makes it very difficult for a lot of communities to be able, or persons like myself, to be able to showcase vulnerability. And I think that that is really, really important because this expectation that you have to be this or you have to be that, we've seen it countless times that individuals that we see, whether it's in the media or leaders or, people who are extraordinary in their field, suffering with depression, suffering with anxiety. So I think that's a really important concept in normalizing and reaching health equity. So some folks may say, well, where do you start? I think you start with recognizing the fact that it is important to lead with empathy, the understanding that you would want your loved one to be treated in various venues, whether it's school, church, work, to be treated with respect, to be treated with dignity, and to recognize that those things are so important in achieving equity. The other piece that I would say is really important is investing, doing self-assessments of yourself, asking yourself questions as it relates to your own implicit biases or attitudes towards mental health. And often we don't always know we have those blind spots. It's really important to recognize that if you do, how do you begin to address them? And how does that not impact your day-to-day interactions? How does that not impact, decisions you make on who you choose for positions, because potentially they may have a mental health condition or they may be experiencing something. It's all of those things that's really important, I think, for employers, I think for leaders. The other I would say is insights into your data. So any wellness program, I think it's important that it's not a blanket program. It's one that can be customized in some ways to the needs of the individuals, to the needs of the community. So that is a focus on desegregating data, looking at data, whether it's based on race, whether it's based on ethnicity, disability, LGBTQ plus communities. So you can then develop and customize your equitable programs to really support the needs of those individuals. If you have one particular intervention, that doesn't mean that intervention is going to be applicable to all. And then you want to look at the data and see, are there variations in the outcomes based on race, ethnicity, and those other categories? The other piece that I would love to just be able to talk a little bit about is the fact that there are social barriers, social drivers that dictate a lot of how individuals either have access to getting the mental health services that they need, or just interacting, with colleagues, right? Sometimes, I've seen cases where someone may not get a promotion because They may be dealing or have neurodiversity, and it's never been shared. So it's important for employers and leaders to customize affinity programs or wellness programs that support and enable individuals, that allow them to feel comfortable in that environment and recognize that you don't have any, implicit bias around individuals that may be experiencing those things that limit the ability for them to be promoted or to move into spaces of leadership or to get a stretch assignment. We've seen this happen all too often. I know I've seen it in my career. And once you recognize those things, you have a heightened awareness and there's more sensitivity around that. The last thing I will add is really about reimagining health. Reimagining health from a standpoint of health does not just happen within the four walls of the hospital or the doctor's office or the reliance only on mental health professionals. Reimagining health allows us to build a resilient community. And that starts with how the workplace engages with various and different individuals, faith-based organizations, schools. I would implore everyone that's on this call today, all of the different supporters, of the organization today that we're really focused in, has brought us together to bring this important topic, to really think critically about how you're addressing equity in your day-to-day practices. Because I think at the end of the day, the outcomes that you're striving for in any industry, you won't see the fruits of your labor if you don't start to, number one, as I went back before, call out structural racism, call out disparities, look for opportunities to really engage and get feedback, have leadership promote and focus on addressing their own issues to normalize and support when possible. And lastly, it is going back to reimagining health. So I thank you today for this presentation. And I really just want to hope and engage everyone that you're filling your cup, whatever that is, finding connections in community and really leading with empathy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was very inspiring. And you gave us some really incredible, helpful hints and thoughts about how we can be part of the solution in this space. And that's what we're all about, right? We're here to get together to share best practices, to give ideas, and then to take action. And I think you've set us up to take some action as individuals, and we thank you for that. So thanks so much for joining us, Tracy. And now we have Bailey Fruman, psychotherapist, coach, author, and founder of MindRise, who's going to talk about navigating stress and preventing burnout. Oh, help me with this, Bailey, please.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, of course, to NJBIA for having me. And thank you for our first two speakers, Tracy and Nancy, because they laid out the landscape for us, right? So here I am, I'm gonna have a conversation with you. I'm gonna encourage you, if you've got yourself busy doing 87 other things as you're doing this presentation, I'm going to encourage you to hop in the chat for this one, because this is one of those conversations that we're about to have that you've either been having in the back of your mind, or hopefully this is one that's going to wake you up. And the reason I say that in the most loving way possible is that many of us are on autopilot. That's the thing about burnout. Burnout can often have us with this like low grade depression. So I want to talk about that. And I want to kind of just take the Band-Aid off today for us, because while we do understand the landscape that Nancy and Tracy have shared with us for today, and we know because we've been living it for 3 years, we still have to acknowledge that we're not alone, right? There's been so many changes. So some interesting numbers, because I'm a numbers girl, I'm a little bit of a geek. As Michelle said, I am a psychotherapist. I'm a coach. I own a coaching company called MindRise, and we work with leaders and entrepreneurs on really getting out of their own way, mastering their mindset, and building teams together. So Gallup poll. All right, you ready for these numbers? And feel free to write them down. Gallup poll says 60% of people report being detached at work, right? this is interesting. One could say, oh, that's because we're out of the office. Another could say that that's because I'm just dead behind the eyes from being in front of a screen all the time. Okay, some more numbers. Did you know that of the people who were polled by Gallup, 50% report being chronically stressed, like wake up to go to sleep type of stress. And almost 20% of people go as far as to saying that they're absolutely miserable in their career. I find that these numbers are really interesting and probably smaller than some of the conversations that we navigate either with colleagues or even within ourselves, our partners. There's a lot of stress going on, right? So I want you to picture what our environments have shifted and changed to. And one would say that, hey, it's been 3 years, just get used to it by now. But what we have to take into account, as Tracy and Nancy had both shared, is that we weren't necessarily prepared for this change. We weren't necessarily prepared for the multiple hats that we would have to wear. So for today, for our discussion, I really want to focus on 3 things, right? First, and I'm going to drop it in our chat, I think I can do that. I have a burnout quiz for you. And the reason that I like to just do a burnout quiz is because I think that what we need is we need a baseline. My team and I put a ton of research into this very simple burnout quiz because I think that, as I mentioned from the very beginning, we have this low grade buzz of stress, which can often be that low grade depression, or it can be low grade anxiety. And we're going to hear from other speakers throughout the day talking about mental health impact, especially in our workplace. But you and I know that it's so much more than that, right? It goes beyond just the workplace, whether that workplace is virtual or that workplace is where we have to, schlep into the city or, organize our schedules so that the kids are taken care of for pickup, or that this one's got this activity, or now we've got this change with this business trip. There are a lot of moving parts in our life. So I want to hear from you in our chat. I want to hear from you. Like, what does burnout actually look like for you? And while you guys are hopping in the chat, I'm also going to hop in the chat. And I don't know if I could share this with you, or I'm just going to pop it in the chat and maybe Kate can blast it out. This is the burnout quiz. I like this burnout quiz. I'm tossing it to you because I think that it's important that we start with a baseline. Where am I at when it comes to burnout, right? Am I at a high level burnout? Am I at a moderate level of burnout? Do I have a low level of burnout? Where are you when it comes to burnout? So let's start with that. The other 2 things that we're going to do in my TED Talk here today, in our few minutes together, is we're going to identify if we are actually in burnout. And then here's my favorite part, guys, what to do about it, right? What to do about burnout. Because yes, we can understand the landscape of our environment, whether that is our own backyard or the global impact as a whole. And I don't know about you, but day to day, the only person I have to navigate and hear their voice every single day is myself. And if my internal voice is feeling negative or feeling exhausted, right? It's going to be really hard for me to do the things that I have to do. And for so many of us, that's wearing multiple hats. That is being a parent, being a caregiver, being a partner. For me at my company, it's not only me working with clients, but it's also me directing my team. And I'm going here and I'm going there. And when we are burnt out, it's really hard to pour from an empty cup. It just is. So I'm curious for you. And again, I don't know if you guys can hop in the chat or the Q&A, feel free if you've got questions, but I want to create a conversation here. What are the qualities of burnout, right? So if we're starting with our baseline of understanding whether or not we're burnt out, what are some of those qualities of burnout? And again, feel free to jump into the chat, or if you are at your desk, just write down, what are some of my qualities of burnout? How do you know that you're burnt out? And let me give you a little spectrum. Okay. Oh, Kate's hopping in the chat. She said, feel free to reply here. Yes. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to open up my chat so I can see. I love it. I love it. We're on it. Okay. Lynn saying mental fatigue. Betty saying always tired, irritation, grace. Oh, yes, absolutely. Anybody find that like little edge? That little edge is not going to take much to put you over, right? Can't focus, sometimes snapping. Yep. Hard to smile, right? hard to smile, or it just feels like, hi, everyone. Yep, I'm dying inside. I'm dead behind the eyes. Yep. I'm just making it through. And what we have to understand is that for so long, exhausted, forgetting details, ooh, that is a really, really important one. Forgetting details, a great quality of burnout. And I say great loosely, right? That's one of those things, right? Anybody reading these things, either in the chat or as I'm saying them out loud and saying, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too. Right? Some of our qualities of burnout can be impacting our sleep. That could be anything from sleeping too much or sleeping too little. Snapping, irritation, finding it hard to smile, being exhausted, brain fog, forgetting our details, always fatigued. Anybody experience decision fatigue? So much so that when it comes time for dinner, you're like, that's the decision I can't even make at this point in time, right? And because we've been experiencing burnout for so long, it's almost like it's an outfit that we're wearing. It's almost something that we've put on and we just haven't taken off, right? We just haven't. It remains this way. Absolutely. Michelle's popping in here. Agree all around. Yeah, Michelle, absolutely. Absolutely. Dazed snacking. Anybody emotional eaters? Yeah, absolutely. It happens to us, especially when your office is right next to the kitchen. Makes it very easy. What are some of the other qualities of burnout, and where, next question, guys, where does it show up? Where does burnout show up for you? Work, right? Show up at work? Home? Or does home feel like a nice oasis from it all? In some ways, that oasis that we might have had, and I'll use that term loosely, everybody gets to choose their own definition, but that oasis that we had pre-pandemic has now become the place, as we remember, where we were educating and we were working and we were, mopping the floors and all the things at once. I remember the very, very beginning of the pandemic, and I would get all dressed up for work and I would get on my computer. And inevitably, I had a 5-year-old at the very beginning of pandemic. You can only imagine what kindergarten on an iPad was like. And she's running around and I'm like, it got to such a point where she was popping on, hi, everybody. We got to a point where we tried to figure out what was going to be our new normal, right? Because we were experiencing our burnout globally, at home, at work. Burnout can show up in our relationships. Anybody find that their burnout shows up in the way that they are taking care of themselves? Right? Does burnout show up in not working out? Does burnout even show on the other spectrum of working out too much? We all have different experiences. So when we start to break down burnout, right? Because in many ways, it's something that's wrapped itself around us. We have to identify first, right? Because I promise you guys, I've been doing this work for nearly 20 years when it comes to understanding how people are wired and helping them to make changes. You cannot change anything if you don't have awareness first. Everybody comes in and they're like, where's the magic wand? I want to change this, right? But the truth is that unless we're aware of it and we start to extract ourselves from it, there's absolutely no way that we can change it. So first is that awareness. What are the qualities of burnout? Second, where is it showing up for me, right? We've got some things popping in the comments, right? Not working out, forgetting ourselves, poor self-care. Yeah, just not actually engaging. That's in many ways. It's not only where it shows up, but also how does it show up? As we were talking earlier, it can show up in forgetting some details. It could show up in really not even being able to engage socially. I've talked to lots of clients that they are on Zoom so often that they reach a maximum capacity for how much that they can take in terms of information all day long, that they then have trouble having relationships in real life, right? It's not so much the tech barrier. It's more or less the fact that they're at their bandwidth. And you know what I like to call that? I like to call that our smoke alarms. So write that one down. What are my smoke alarms? What are my smoke alarms? So before the house is absolutely ablaze, right? And the house being you, what are your smoke alarms? Maybe that is that mindless snacking. Maybe that is that irritability that's snapping. Maybe that is the like brain fog, detail forgetting, constant fatigue. What are your smoke alarms? We have to, again, come to that place of awareness, because when my smoke alarms start to go off, they give me an indication that I'm losing my bandwidth, which means this is going to, and as you guys know, and many leaders, even many people within the organization, productivity, wrong, right? Efficiency, wrong. Motivation, wrong. And why is that? Why is that? Because we are stretched so thin, because we've been ignoring ourselves. We've been ignoring those signals that we have that are going off for us, but we are so artfully trying to shove them in the closet, right? So the question is, I know, and I'm looking at the time, I've got, I think, 2 minutes left. All right, guys, my question for you is, what do we want instead? What do we want instead, right? Because we said we had to be aware. We had to identify the qualities. We need to know where it's showing up, how it's showing up. Okay, well then give me the magic wand version. What do you guys want instead? How do you want to feel instead of being burnt out? Feel free to throw that in the chat. Oh yeah, I love this. Another, oh yeah, one of the things we do is this scroll, scroll, scroll. It's actually one of the worst things that we can do for ourselves. And the reason for that is because we're getting those dopamine and serotonin hits from the things visually that we like. Whereas that's happening almost like being at a slot machine. So it's actually really not helpful, even though we think that that's helping us to numb out. All right, what do we want instead, guys? Restful night's sleep. Do we want support? Yeah. Oh, now it's going. Here goes the chat. All right. To feel calm. Anybody feel that way? The ability to feel calm, to be content. So just not constantly stressed, right? We're not even setting the bar of like, I want to feel so relaxed. No, I just want to not feel constantly stressed, right? To just the time to not think about all the bad stuff and remember the good stuff. Yeah, coming back to that place of gratitude. So here's the thing, as I wrap up with you guys today. Again, take the burnout quiz, because we've got to start with a baseline. If you want to make any changes, that's what you have to do. It's in the chat. I know Kate will post it again. The next thing that you need to do is you need to identify, right? Because we said we're walking away from this conversation with our next steps. Identify what's going on for you. Identify those smoke alarms. Make sure that you're clear about what you want instead, right? We have to know what bumpers that we need to put in place, what supports that we need to put in place, and then to get yourself a +1 in your corner, whether that's somebody at home, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach. The only way to change something is to do something different. So I'm here. I see you. Burnout is real. It's happening at work. It's happening at home. It's happening in our relationships. It's happening with our kids. It's happening globally. And we're never going to get off the merry-go-round unless we raise our hand and we say, I'm ready to get off. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you.
Thanks, Bailey. Absolutely, that whole thing about self-awareness is just so incredibly important. It's crazy. In fact, and sometimes we can frighten ourselves when we have that, that sudden awareness of what's going on in our life. The opportunity to stay focused is always a challenge for many of us. And I just think there's so many exacerbating factors going on in society today. I wake up every day and it's like, oh, I think it's the society. We've hit our max at this point. It's like, what else can we throw on the society at any point in time? And then voila, there's something new that day. I'm like, wow, really? Where'd that come from? So really enlightening. I love the burnout quiz. I love the whole idea of challenging ourselves on what's affecting and impacting and taking action. I'm going to repeat that, everyone, taking action, right? Because that's what it's all about. So Bailey, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us this morning. We so greatly appreciate it. So now we're going to pivot just slightly and we're going to bring HR into the conversation. Help me welcome Judy Saylor, who's the Director of Learning and Development at PrimePoint HRMS, who has a presentation called Your Mental Health and Your HR Department. There are resources. She's going to tell us about those resources we can all take advantage of. Judy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Just presenting with this group of folks is absolutely amazing. And I will tell you, there's probably going to be some redundancy because we're all on the same page with this. I always like to start off with definitions. I like to be very clear on what we're talking about. So, what is mental health? And mental health is defined as a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. Some folks add in social well-being, especially in the age of social media and the treatment one receives on occasion from that act. Your mental health contributes to how you think, feel, act, and it relates to your resiliency and your relationship with others. We all know this. We're paying attention to this presentation at this point. What is wellness? And wellness is the other side to this piece. It's the totality of your health. It's both mental and physical. If your physical self is not feeling well and ill, your mental health is often impacted by that. And so, in SHRM, the Society of Human Resources, we know that employers need to look at both of those pieces, your mental health and your physical health. When employers focus on wellness, they're aiming to provide employees with preventative solutions to avoid illness and long-term health problems. This can be anything from gym memberships to having a gym in your building to encouraging people to go and take a walk. I know several very large insurance companies got everybody pedometers and had challenges and, trying to get folks to focus on themselves and give themselves some time. But why should HR focus on mental health? Other than the obvious, because it matters. A big issue that we see in this realm is that there are many benefits to having a mentally healthy workforce. Research suggests that creating a positive work environment and promoting and supporting mentally healthy workers results in increased productivity, increased economic contributions, completion of higher quality work, happiness in the workplace, lower rates of absenteeism, improved employee engagement, increased employee retention and loyalty, reduced employer and employee healthcare costs, better working relationships between employees and leadership, improved ability to empathize with customers and coworkers, that customer service kind of piece, and increase in inclusivity. A healthy workplace is one where employees and their leaders actively work together to create a work environment that promotes and protects the health, safety, and well-being of all of the employees. Mental health and wellness is the core of the employee experience. So here are some things you need to consider. And Bailey brought it up beautifully. Be aware. Every employee should be aware of their surroundings. If this was a first aid class, we would call it survey the scene. Why? Because it is critical for your safety to survey the scene. As a working parent, it can be stressful to make sure I am getting it all done. High school starts very early, drop off in the morning, being on time to school events, being on time to work events, having to leave work early to pick them up after his extracurricular activities, getting back online to make sure I'm getting all my work done, going to scouts, going to volunteering. I feel like a tornado some days spinning around trying to make it all work at the same time. And I am the sandwich generation. The grandparents are happy and healthy, still living in their own homes, but they will be living with us at some point. So there's already a lot of responsibility that I have for that. I'm not alone in this. Now, I'm not complaining. I tell folks I have a very robust life, but it took me a long while to see it that way. I attended a program that was very insightful, and it was called Spot It. It gave me the tools to survey my situation, to determine what I was feeling, and to process what I was doing right, and what did I want to change. It gave me some time to flex that emotional intelligence muscle so that I can keep in check my level of stress, my anxiousness, whatever it might have been at that point. I have a great kid. He's 16. He's taller than me, but he's a good kid. He listens. He does his homework. I don't have all those troubles that a lot of other families have. I have a wonderful husband. I work for a great company. At Prime Point, we're a family-owned business, and I am not part of that family, but I am part of the family here. And unfortunately, not every company is like that. Being aware of staff, their moods, their absences, their lateness is important, not for the discipline side of things. See, folks have a lot going on under the surface, but we all have tells. HR, their supervisors, their managers, they need to know their people. check in with them. Be human. It's okay. You can talk. The next piece, provide resources. Employee assistance programs, as well as medical insurance, can be resources to staff and family right now. These are critical. They are not something that HR is going to provide, but they're something that can be provided to the employees. HR can provide appropriate resources to employees struggling with mental health, but they are not mental health professionals necessarily. You want to educate your leadership on the best practices. You want them to follow when it becomes clear, follow up with an employee who is displaying mental health concerns. NJBIA has a whole page dedicated to this through the partners that they have with RWJ and some of the other organizations. These are critical. Take advantage of those opportunities. HR can have an open door, whether it is to vent or specifically for help. HR needs to be open to that conversation. Not everyone is coming to you to complain. If your HR is not feeling that way, they need to join the Garden State Council SHRM, which is the New Jersey chapter of the Society for Human Resources, and get the latest issues and the latest trends and the latest solutions on what HR can do for its staff. The next part, address workplace staff. I was giggling as Bailey was talking because I'm in the same mindset. I'm the geek, I need numbers. The American Institute of Stress estimates that 83% of us are stressed at work. There is an institute for this. I was very disheartened to find that. According to Indeed, 71% of adults in the US reported having at least one symptom of stress. Some of the symptoms that are the highest on the list, agitated, frustrated, moody, feeling overwhelmed, having a hard time quieting your mind, having low energy, headaches, aches, pains, insomnia. Adults, almost 1 in 5 adults are taking a sleep aid. The US is the leading country in the sale of global sleep aids. None of us are sleeping. We should all hang out at night. It might be more fun. And then the big ones, forgetfulness, disorganization, procrastination. I think I've been stressed since I was like 4, just putting that out there. When, you know, we have to get that moment of sometimes I need to take a minute and take a breath and prioritize. Maybe think of something that I've done right. Yes, I did a great job on X. Or yes, I had a great meeting with X. We've got to put those positive things in so that the stress doesn't overwhelm us and we're reminded of, I did this right. I'm on the right track. I'm working in the right direction. Next, be understanding and empathetic. We talk about work-life balance, but is there ever really a balance? I teach college and I often tell my college kids, there is no balancing this stuff. And I usually use expletives with it. You have to learn to be flexible. You have to learn to prioritize. You have to learn you might need to walk away from a project in order to be able to move forward with it. If your stress is at a stage where you are staring at a screen, you need to back away and give yourself, go take a walk, go outside. We all know that, you know, when we go outside and we get into little nature and we kind of blow off the rest of that moment, we can come back in and we can function better. We are often more empathetic to others than we are ourselves, okay? I am absolutely one of those that can pour into TikTok over the cats and dogs because they don't cause problems most days. They may bark, they may cry, they may need things, but they're sweet and lovable and you need that positivity sometimes, so that's where it ends up. Displaying empathy would be more challenging in an organization where the HR department is operating without the appropriate knowledge or expertise to provide support during employee hardships. We can say we're sympathetic to someone, we can say we're empathetic. That doesn't mean that our experience has been the same as their experience. And there are a lot of times folks are having something much more difficult than what you may have ever lived with. Experiences can vary between employees and having someone to provide a listening ear and understand their position is beneficial. And then the follow-up of, here are some resources that I would suggest you contact. Treating individuals who struggle with mental health with empathy and understanding also allows you to provide realistic solutions to help them more smoothly navigate work. We know that there were many companies during the pandemic that would say to staff, it doesn't have to be 9 to 5, because there were small children at home, as Bailey was saying, having to go to kindergarten. You know, I had a 7th grader and an 8th grader, and I earned the t-shirt, you know, best homeschool mom there was. But that was one of the most stressful times for me, because in my brain, I need to work and I needed him to work. And there were days that clashed because he needed assistance because they were doing algebra or geometry or something that he really needed to sit with a teacher for. And that is not me. So HR's role in this is in the bringing together of the right resources. The department needs to normalize the genuine feelings and emotions of a person while providing the personnel with the assistance required to navigate life's challenges and at work. In closing, the tactical things that HR needs to do, and feel free to go back to your HR folks. If they're missing something, have them reach out to me. Create a clear workplace guidelines for health and safety. It's not just about what to do in the building if there's a theft or those kinds of things. It's what is our stage is going to be in the event that someone shows signs of a mental illness. Establish an employee assistance program and talk about it frequently. There is nothing wrong with it. In schools now, in music, there are at least a dozen songs out there right now in mainstream, you know, XM Sirius, that are all about a person's mental health and what a person's going through. And the young people are hearing it and they're saying, yeah, I feel that way some days. I need to. The next generation is going to be much better at this than we were. Provide supervisors and managers with mental health training. They need to recognize the signs and symptoms. Just because somebody's coming in late every day doesn't mean they're being a jerk about their job. There may be a real problem for them. Or it could be they're a sandwich generation and the center that they have to drop their mom off at isn't open until a certain time. We need to be able to be aware of these things and help our staff. Last, work to create a positive workforce. It's not always parties. Sometimes it's a thank you note. Sometimes it's a, hey, how you doing? I work for a company that's family. The president, the CEO, the CIO, the vice presidents, they walk around on a regular basis and they pop their head in your door and they say, how you doing today? How's it going? What's going on? What are you working on? You have to connect with your people. And that's one of the best things you can do to be sure that everyone's safe. This will not make things perfect, but it will help your team thrive more. When they thrive, they become part of the healthy workplace. And this helps your company to improve all the way around. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Judy. Again, great information. And you know, this is I was about to say two-way street, but it's really kind of three-way street, right? There's the front line, there's the manager, there's the employer at the top. And it takes everybody in this discussion. It takes everybody. And there's the one caveat that I heard from one of our other events was when you say how you doing, make sure when you say how you doing, you're ready to listen and stop and engage that person, right? Because sometimes folks walk around doing that. They're not so authentic about it, right? And then you can really make someone feel even worse, right? So I'm always so conscious when I heard that tidbit once at another event, because I do that all. I'm always like, hey, how are you? And it's like, you don't know the answer you're going to get. So be prepared to stop and actually take time to engage that person. But thank you, Judy, because you know the HR function is so important. I get very bummed when I hear, you know, HR is there for the employer. HR is there for the company. That means everybody in it, right? It's to protect everybody, no matter what your position or station in that company is. And in this space, it's critically important that we now allow ourselves to have a little bit more of the discussions that we need to understand how our workforce is doing without violating, you know, all those rules out there about what we can and can't ask for. So thank you, Judy, so much for bringing some perspective to the HR. Our next speaker is Dr. Lisa Lacan, co-founder and director at Blessed Ministries, BMI Employment Services. She's going to be talking about the stigma surrounding mental illness. Dr. Lacan, the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you. And I am in agreement with Judy about the TikTok tunnel. I call it the TikTok tunnel with the cats and dogs because I'm like, oh my gosh, I even tell my husband, bye, I'll be back in a couple of hours. I'm going down that TikTok tunnel for just a little piece of sanity, believe it or not. So I want to piggyback off of that because that's very important. I need you all to do me a favor. Unless you're driving. If you're driving, don't do this. But I need you all to close your eyes and think about this scenario. You're in the 5th grade, walking home from school by yourself in a sense. Your older sister, she's 5 years older than you. She's back there with her friends, but you're walking by yourself. You have your little book bag and this black umbrella that you got from your granddad with the long big spoke and the wooden handle. And you're walking up the street and you're just clicking that umbrella on the sidewalk. Click, 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 click. And then all of a sudden, these 2 huge dogs come out this house and attack you. That's what happened to me when I was in the 5th grade. And I have to say, I thank God I had my grandfather's umbrella, because the only thing I could do, because I did not want to be outpole that day, the only thing I could do, I had to jump up on the car and with the umbrella, just poke and, with the dogs and put the umbrella, I stuck the dog in the mouth with the umbrella. And the only thing I remember, the dog was, "Arf, arf, arf." And then the owner of the dogs finally came out the house. Not when I was being attacked, but when the owner heard her dog being mistreated. So, as a result of that incident, I want you to stick with me. As a result of that incident, I was fearful for many years of big dogs. I didn't want to have anything to do with big dogs. And I have come to a place and point in time in my life where I have personally have a theory about what happened to me and how this affects us having stigma in our life. And I call it the bear effect. BEAR. It's our beliefs expected as reality. Oftentimes in our mind, we have these belief systems that we think things are really going to happen, but in actuality, it does not. So within the bear effect, the BEAR, beliefs expected as reality, there are 3 different data points. Number 1, you have historical data. Number 2, you have witnessed data. And number 3, you have hearsaw data. And I'm going to explain what each one is right now. So with me being personally attacked by that dog, I was the target of this traumatic event. That's historical data. So every time I saw a big dog, my mind went back to that incident and I assumed all big dogs are going to attack me. Now, witnessed data is this. Say, for instance, my sister, what if she saw it? She was there in the environment. She witnessed it, but she was not a direct target of it. But because something negative happened to her sister, now she's like, oh my gosh, I don't like big dogs either. And then what if, which is the last data point, here saw, what if an elderly couple who traditionally and typically walk on that street, but they heard or saw in the news that this little Lisa, little girl, was mauled by 2 dogs. they would probably change their walking route and not walk on that street. Because in their mind, they're thinking the street is not safe. So I want you to keep that story, keep that scenario, and keep the bear effect. Just kind of park it to the side. Now let's move over into stigma. So what exactly is stigma? So if you look at the origin of stigma, it really means to carve out something as being shameful. Okay? Carve out something as being shameful. Now, there are two types of stigma. We have public stigma and we have self-stigma. So today I'm going to talk about public stigma. Now, public stigma, according to research by Corrigan and Watson, there are 3 ingredients which make up stigma. Are you all ready for the ingredients? It's like baking a cake. If you don't have all 3, you fall short. So the first ingredient, number 1, stereotype. The second one is prejudice. And the third ingredient is discrimination. So what exactly is a stereotype? According to researchers Corrigan and Watson, a stereotype is a negative belief system about a group. I usually go a little further. A negative stereotype about people, places, or things. So I had a negative stereotype about what? Large dogs, as a result of what happened to me. The second ingredient in stigma is prejudice. Prejudice is basically you're in agreement with your negative belief system. All right. So with me and the dogs, I really believed that large dogs would forever terrorize me. Forever. And I'm telling you all, I used to have nightmares about dogs chasing me. I used to have all of these thoughts about huge dogs because of the historical data that I experienced. And I believed that all big dogs would attack me. So then the third one that we have is discrimination. And discrimination is basically a response to it's behavior response. So you are responding in a sense to what the prejudice is that you think. And how does that look? With me, with large dogs, I socially distance myself from them. And that's what happens with stigma. You want to socially distance yourself from people, places, or things that you don't feel comfortable with, based on historical data, based on a witnessed data, or based on a hear-saw data. So let's go into now mental illness. Why is there so much stigma when it comes to mental illness? Is it because of the things that we have experienced personally? Because some of the stigma that we have outside of being pushed away is saying, I feel uncomfortable with a person who is diagnosed with a mental illness because, number one, I think they're going to be violent. Number two, I just don't know. They just make me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know. So you're always on guard. And a lot of people may not want to be on guard. But why are you always on guard? Why do you think people with mental illness are violent? And why do you think that they're going to exhibit those violent behaviors toward you? So when we look at different things that we may do, say, for instance, in the workspace, how does stigma look? So if you want to socially distance yourself from the person that makes you feel uncomfortable, what are you going to do? You're not going to make accommodations, reasonable accommodations. You may not want to hire a person based on your belief that they may have some type of disability. So anytime you want to socially distance yourself and not be in the same area or whatever with this person, whether it's housing, whether it's employment, whether it's at the church or in the church, whether it's at school, you're saying to yourself, this person who has a mental illness is making me feel uncomfortable. Therefore, I need to separate myself from them, socially distance myself from them in order to keep my comfortability level up here or even up here. So think about it. I had a fear of big dogs. I stigmatized big dogs. And those dogs that attacked me, because yes, they did attack me, it was a German Shepherd and a Doberman. Those are to me one of the, but when it comes to a mental illness, were you in a situation with someone and they became violent? Or were you in the environment and you witnessed it? Or did you get your information from the media? And based on that, now you have a belief system that you believe will become a reality based on one of those data points, the historical data, witnessed data, or hear, saw data. So how do you embrace, because that's the opposite of socially distancing yourself. How do you embrace someone that is, in a sense, may not be like you? Whether it's based on their skin, whether it's based on their diagnosis, how do you embrace someone that is different from you? How do you embrace someone that is going through a mental health challenge right now? How do you embrace someone that is diagnosed with schizophrenia? How do you embrace someone that is diagnosed with bipolar or with schizoaffective disorder? How do you embrace that? So, a couple of things that you can do. Number one, you need to reflect, where is this perhaps faulty belief system coming from? And sometimes I call it a dirty little secret. It's a dirty little secret that a lot of people may not know, that we have a fear. And that's the bottom line. Oftentimes in stigma is rooted in fear. Fear that our world would be changed from being comfortable to being uncomfortable because this person is in our environment. Fear of losing our prestige, fear of losing our peace. Think about it. When it comes to civil rights, everything that was set up against Black African Americans, it was based on fear. Fear that perhaps white people would lose control. Fear that, say for instance, if I'm sitting next to a person diagnosed with a mental illness, now your coworkers may not know that, maybe only HR, but if I'm sitting next to someone that appears to have a mental illness, based on the conversations that you've overheard, based on certain things, you may fear not sitting next to them because you may think that they're going to lash out. You may think that they're going to be violent. You may think that they're going to do you some type of harm because of your belief system is rooted in fear. So that's what you have to do. That's the first thing. You need to reflect. Where is this thought coming from? And then you need to reject. I had to reject the idea that all big dogs were going to attack me. It was faulty thinking. Not every big dog is going to attack me. Not every big dog was thinking about me. So I had to reject the faulty thinking. So now what do we need to do when it comes to a mental illness? We need to reject the faulty thinking. Just because a person has schizophrenia, their psychoses can be managed with medication, with therapy, whatever. It can be managed. Not every person who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia is violent. Not every person who's diagnosed with bipolar is violent. So we have to reject the faulty thinking. And then from rejecting, we have to come to a place where now we have to replace those thoughts. And now we have to reprogram, because our brain is such a wonderful, delicate computer that oftentimes we have to reprogram. How does that look in the sphere of dealing with mental illness? Reprogram myself to purposefully, intentionally understand that someone who is diagnosed with a mental illness is not going to lash out at me. In fact, they may bring something wonderful and positive to the table because they may have a different perspective in how they view things. And at the end of the day, it can affect your bottom line in terms of helping to increase your revenue. And then the last thing we have to have a renewed mind in order to respond differently to that person with the mental illness. And I think I am almost out of time, but I just want to say thank you all. But remember the bear effect, beliefs expected as reality. Oftentimes it isn't what it appears to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lacan. Yeah, absolutely. We say all the time, right? The world lives on perception and we have to step back and get to reality. Seth, you and I have a little too much in common. I was bit by a dog when I was young too. Very traumatic event. It took me a long time to warm up to dogs from there. So, but thank you. Thanks for sharing your personal story as well as your professional insight on how we make this switch from perception to reality. Greatly appreciated.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Next up is Chris Barton. Chris is the Senior Director integrated systems of care and network innovation for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. And Chris is going to talk about a topic that is too much present these days, youth mental health. Chris, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with all of you today about the impact that our youth mental health crisis is having on the workplace. In the brief time that I have with you, I'm going to address 4 important concerns. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what youth mental health crisis means. Next, I'm going to tell you about how the youth mental health crisis is affecting New Jersey business and industry. Then I'm going to tell you what employers can do to support their employees and their families. And finally, I'm going to give you some information about how parents can help their kids who are struggling with mental health issues. So point number 1, what exactly do I mean by youth mental health crisis? The headline that takes my breath away is that suicide is the second leading cause of death for children, adolescents, and young adults between the ages of 10 to 24. That means that children as young as 10 years old are dying by suicide. That just crushes a mom's heart, right? The only greater cause of death in this age group is accidents and injuries. According to a national study, more young people, especially young girls, have seriously considered suicide than ever before. In fact, 1 in 3 young girls have considered suicide. 1 in 4 have made a plan for suicide. And 1 in 9 have tried to end their life by suicide. Female students in grades 9 and 10 are most vulnerable to suicide thoughts and planning. And there are a number of risk factors that contribute to suicide among youth. For example, a child who has serious or complex psychiatric conditions is at higher risk for suicide. These may be psychiatric disorders like major depression disorder, bipolar disorder, and substance use or conduct disorders. Or there may be what we call co-occurring psychiatric conditions when there are more than one psychiatric conditions, any combination of mood disorders or destructive disorders or substance use on top of a mental health condition. All of those are considered risk factors for suicide. Then there's something called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. These are traumatic experiences that affect children at a deep emotional level. And they're things like physical and emotional or sexual abuse, household dysfunction, including mental illness or substance use in the home, intimate partner violence in the home, parents or family members who are incarcerated, or death or divorce of a parent. Those all have lasting, deep emotional impacts on children. There are also environmental influences that impact on youth mental health: food and housing insecurity, poverty and violence, feelings of social isolation and bullying. Family relationships and support networks also play an important role in youth mental health. The presence or the absence of healthy, supportive adults contribute to youth mental wellness. Find those people who can have a positive impact on your children and be sure to include them in your lives. And something that my colleague Tracy Parris Benjamin mentioned earlier, being a member of a marginalized population, a person of color, a member of the LGBTQ community, anyone who has experienced racism or bigotry, all of those contribute to higher risk factors for youth suicide. We tend to focus on risk of suicide, and that is certainly the most extreme example of mental health problems. But I think we also need to focus more on prevention and early intervention to avoid the risk of suicide altogether. Here's another alarming statistic. I know that we're all data focused this morning, but only about 50% of the children aged 6 to 17 who were diagnosed with mental health conditions actually receive treatment for their mental health condition. There are all kinds of reasons for this. I think many of us have covered this, including stigma, access to care, parental consent, and their availability to take a child to appointments. But just recognize that half of the children who need treatment for behavioral health are not receiving treatment. That in itself is a risk for suicide. Some of the most common mental health diagnoses among youth include attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety, behavioral health problems, and depression. And for those who experience depression, about 3/4 of them also have another psychiatric disorder, including anxiety or other behavioral problems. Many people attribute the decline in our children's mental health to the COVID-19 pandemic and the isolation, the grief and loss, and the anxiety that came with that. But the reality is our children's mental health has been declining for almost a decade now. Beginning in 2014, we saw early signs of increase in mental health concerns, thoughts of suicide, and attempts to die by suicide. Some people attribute this to the insidious nature or maybe the obsessive use and lack of regulation around social media. Others point the finger at bullying and social ills. Whatever the cause, the tide has certainly turned. Our young people are more depressed and more anxious than they have ever been in the past. And there's nothing right now to suggest that that's going to get any better anytime soon. So we need to be able to deal with the manifestation of youth mental health. So point number 2, how does youth mental health crisis affect New Jersey business and industry? I'm sure a few of you are wondering why I'm talking about youth mental health at the New Jersey Business and Industry Conference. Some of you may be employers of young people, so this may impact you directly. But even more of you may be the employers of parents of young people. And so this topic should resonate with you. A national study reported that 2 out of 5 employees, or 40% of our workforce, have a child under the age of 18. And depending on the industry, that statistic may vary. The health of children affects who cares for them, which in turn affects employee health and productivity. Said another way, if the kids are not all right, neither are their working caregivers. Over the past few years, more than 1 in 5 caregivers have voluntarily left their jobs to better care for their children's behavioral health needs. That says something. So how does the youth mental health crisis affect companies? Youth mental health concerns affect absenteeism. Missing work to stay home with an emotionally sick child in the same way that they would for physically sick children. Employees may miss work, they may leave early or arrive late due to behavioral health appointments. As many as 50% of working parents report missing at least 1 day of work per month due to child illness. Youth mental health impacts on productivity and creativity. The pressure of having a sick child, whether it's behavioral health or physical health conditions, impacts how much parents can be present in the workplace and how much they can contribute and interact with their peers. So that affects productivity and creativity. Youth mental health concerns also impact your company's healthcare expense. Untreated or undertreated mental health concerns, like physical health concerns, will get worse over time. They may even manifest in physical health problems that lead to physical health care needs. There are often emergency department visits and inpatient stays, all of which drive up the healthcare costs for employers and the cost of healthcare for parents. So the mental health of children definitely affects the mental health and productivity of parents and caregivers, which in turn affects New Jersey business and industries. The health of companies is inextricably tied to the health of families. So point number 3, how can employers support their employees and their families? Judy talked about some of the things that companies have done to improve the overall health and wellness of their workforce. Gym memberships and employee benefits. Many companies have pivoted and have expanded their benefits, increased their EAP offerings, developed those wellness programs and other resources to address their employees' mental health and wellness concerns. But what have companies done to help their employees cope with the stress and pressure of their children's mental health concerns? Supporting parents and caregivers who act in the role of parent is a critical public health priority. Sometimes it's our employees that need help getting the help that they need. And we've talked about this today, making sure that we have a comprehensive behavioral health benefit package, offering a robust employee assistance program, making sure that employees have access to what we call self-directed care, the ability to access education about conditions and resources that the family may need. Supporting employees in getting the help that their kids and their disabled adult children need, again, with a comprehensive behavioral health benefit. Employers should consider modifying the co-pays arrangement to improve access to care. Remember that for mental health conditions, appointments tend to be weekly or bi-weekly appointments. A $50 copay for a biannual physical health visit may be reasonable, but a $50 copay twice a week may not make that resource accessible for parents. Are there obstacles to your employees accessing the care that they and their kids need? We talked a little bit earlier about promoting work-life harmony. I stay away from the word balance because there's never really going to be a balance between home and life, but we have to find a way for the two to coexist. We talk about building generous parental leave programs or flexible work schedules to support parents in meeting their children's physical and behavioral health needs. That may mean taking them to physical health or behavioral health appointments, attending school meetings. Be sensitive to the fact that behavioral health symptoms often manifest in school-related concerns, grades problems, behavior problems, decision-making, and social relationships. Parents need to be able to partner with schools and educators to address these. And if an employer can give them the space to make that possible, they're going to be a more content employee and more loyal to the company. Encourage both parents to strive for work-life harmony. As employers, we tend to focus on mothers as the primary caregivers. And I have to tell you that this is outdated thinking. Fathers are equally important for promoting children's mental health. Raise awareness and address stigma about mental health, substance use, and other disabilities. Consider implementing employee relations group or affinity groups, and use these groups to advance messaging around education and reducing stigma about behavioral health conditions. May, for example, is Mental Health Awareness Month. Substance Use Recovery Month is in September. Use these opportunities of awareness events to normalize conversations about behavioral health concerns. And then support parents of dependent adults with physical and behavioral health disabilities. Many of these conditions are chronic, lifelong, and the parent continues to live in the caregiving role for that lifetime. Support employees and their families in celebrating successes while supporting ongoing care needs. And Michelle mentioned this earlier. When you ask somebody how they're doing, stop and listen for the answer. Encourage managers to schedule listening check-ins, not necessarily performance check-ins or work-related work, but check in with your employees, especially in a virtual work environment. Team members need to know that somebody cares about what's going on with them and that they're willing to set aside time for a personal check-in. And point number 4, how can parents help their kids who are struggling with mental health issues? The first, and this was just addressed by the previous speaker, addressing the generational and cultural stigma of denial of mental health problems is the best first start. So many of us have biases about mental health problems that we learn from our parents as parents and families that we carry with us. These prevent us from seeking care for ourselves and also for our children. Parental stigma is one of the main reasons that children do not have access to mental health treatment. Some of us just don't know how to recognize the signs and symptoms of mental health problems. Another speaker mentioned this. You can get training on how to recognize mental health problems from the Mental Health Association of New Jersey. They offer mental health first aid training and QPR training that can help you know when your young person is at risk. Some of the other things that parents can start doing right away: be present, actively listen, sit with your child and talk, preferably without electronics, at family meals, during evening downtime, and during car rides. Be open to learning. Parenting is tough. It doesn't come easy to all of us, and many of us didn't have great role models for parenting. There really isn't a great guidebook, so find some help in learning and growing as a parent. Everybody can improve their parenting skills. Take a class, talk to friends, do whatever it takes for you to learn and grow. If there are adverse childhood experiences in your home, address those. Things that can be emotionally toxic, like conflict that is transparent to the children, poor parent-child communication and relationships, untreated substance use disorders and mental health problems in the home, or openly aggressive or hostile behavior has to be addressed in order for the children to be okay. Build in protective factors that support children, close gaps in care needs, address food and housing insecurities. Your EAPs can help you with resources for this. And continue to be present. Develop the warm and supportive relationships that you desire with your children and that they desire with you. It's never too late. Seek help and support from family members, friends, neighbors, communities, churches that can help you and your child grow together. And focus on helping your child develop positive self-esteem, good coping skills, peer relationships, interest in and success in school, and just an ability to articulate your feelings. And I can't stress enough, if there are behavioral health concerns in your home, mental health or substance use disorder, get treatment for those. That's the best thing that you can do to support children in the home. Youth mental health is a huge issue. It's going to take some time to shift the tide, but if we all do things that are within our power to control, we can begin to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Very, very sobering statistics, but a topic we have to pay attention to. And very, very emotional, and absolutely the impact that this has on a family, and then the impact that translates, of course, into the workforce. This is why we provide these resources. And a side note, sometimes we think about, you said the age of the girls, right? The average age, and teenagers, the challenge with teenagers then also is they kind of say, I don't need this. And how do you, a little kid, you put them in the car, you take them. When they get older, it gets a little more challenging, right? So nobody needs to be in this alone. There's so many resources out there. I can't encourage people enough. If you even have the slightest, sight that something isn't going right, talk to somebody about it. They'll talk you through how to make it work. None of us wants to be one of those statistics. And unfortunately, we just see too much of it. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. Let's keep in mind, the things that we should be looking for and how we can be helpful to each other on this. Thanks, Chris. Our last speaker continues in this somewhat, sobering part of the discussion. But again, things we need to be so important and alerted to. Our last speaker today, certainly not the least of which, is Dr. Stephanie Marcello, is the chief psychologist, Rutgers University Behavioral Health Care, who will be giving us an overview of gatekeeper training for suicide prevention. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. I did a hard ch instead of a s. So if I got that wrong, I do apologize, doctor, but thank you so much. I'll turn it over to you now.
You actually said it perfectly. So hello, everyone. I actually put together a little PowerPoint that I'm going to share. I really enjoyed Chris's presentation, and I last minute kind of changed what we were going to talk about and didn't realize how well it actually went with exactly what Chris was talking about. So I'm going to share with you, and I do have slides here. There you go. And I can still see you and have the chat box out. So I'm going to share with you just an overview of what actually Chris mentioned it, gatekeeper training for suicide prevention is. And so let's go. Here we go. So what's a gatekeeper? A gatekeeper is all of you. So yes, we are going to be talking about suicide, and we're going to be talking about signs and symptoms. But I bring it as a message of hope. And I know that it is such a, obviously challenging topic. And that's why sometimes people avoid talking about it. But I'm glad that we're all here today because we need to. That's the most important thing. But it's a message of hope. The more gatekeepers that we have, which is every human being alive on this planet, is all eyes on each other. The more community that we have, the more we're going to see healthier people who are living, meaningful, fulfilled lives for themselves. And when they're not, and when things are going wrong, they're going to feel okay because of that reduced stigma. Actually, Dr. Lisa's presentation too kind of all comes together, I think. So a gatekeeper, if you're not a licensed professional, no one is saying that anybody who is not a licensed behavioral health professional should be providing counseling or treatment. But all of those actions that everyone spoke about today, being that active listener, creating the space for it, if there's anything that you're noticing is just a little off, talking to the person about it in a kind, compassionate way. And one of the most important things, and I'll probably say this 2 more times, if you don't feel like you can talk to somebody about this, you connect with somebody who you know is able to do that. It's okay if you're like, I'm just not there yet. But then you ask a colleague or you ask another family member, hey, I've noticed this is going on with so-and-so. They seem a little different. Can you check in with them? And really what a gatekeeper does is brings hope. We bring hope through positive action. I see you. I want to know what's going on with you. I care about you. You are not alone. These are the messages that we send. So the S word, suicide, the elephant in the room, just like used to be, we talked about trauma being the elephant in the room that is standing right in front of us, but we don't like to talk about. Why is it so hard to talk about? I mean, there's so many reasons. And I also just want to take a moment to say, if anybody here has ever had a suicide attempt or struggled with depression or lost somebody to suicide, if this brings anything up for you, feel free to just lower the volume, go grab some water, or stay present. But we're here, and I just want you to know that this is what we're going to be talking about. It's hard to talk about because there's so many myths, and it's a hard thing to talk about, and hard things sometimes we want to avoid, and it requires a level of vulnerability. I have had friends, and I work a lot with people who've lost children and lost loved ones to suicide. And a common experience is what they'll say, people weren't allowed to come over as if it was contagious, like they wouldn't let their kids come over, or friends, just stopped talking to them. Probably not because they didn't care and love them, but they just didn't know what to say. You don't need to know what to say. You just need to be there. There's really nothing to say but being there. So let's talk about what are some of the myths that stop people from addressing kind of suicide. No one can stop a suicide. It's inevitable. It's actually not true. All research supports to the exact opposite. If people get in a crisis, get help, they're less likely to be suicidal again. There is, oh gosh, he's just absolutely wonderful. A man who, he actually tried to take his own life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he survived. I'm one of the very few people that have survived that jump. And he talks about how he got on the bus that day. We talk about the brain going into like a suicidal mode. And he said, if one person smiles at me or says hi to me, I'm not going to take my life. And in fact, he had the opposite experience that day. People giving him dirty looks, wondering why he was taking so long. He didn't get a smile, and he did jump. Thank goodness he survived. And he's gone on to really bring a lot of positive messages and awareness. Another person I worked with, he talked about how he was also going to jump off a bridge, but there was too much traffic and he didn't want to get hit by a car. So if you think about someone's brain when they're in that state, I mean, he didn't want to get hit by a car, but he was going to go take his life. So absolutely, we can stop it. Confronting a person will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Absolutely not. It's a common belief that if someone, a common myth that if someone brings up the word suicide, that you will put that idea in the person's head who wasn't previously think about it. There's absolutely no evidence for that either. It actually lowers the risk. It opens up communication. It helps people take a moment to not act in that impulsiveness. And it lets them know that someone's there and someone is caring about them. Only experts can prevent suicide. Absolutely not. There are so many people we never even get to see. That's why we need all of you. We need all eyes. We need to take care of and learn about suicide and depression, anxiety, and mental health in the same way that we would recognize the signs of someone, having a heart attack. We've all been really trained in the signs that it looks like when someone is having a heart attack and other health problems. How does suicide happen? Right? So someone loses someone to suicide around you in your life, and it's how, why, what did we miss? And we want to look for one simple answer because that's what human beings do. It must have been this. It must have been that their parents got divorced, or it must have been that they were getting bullied. And that's called what we call an oversimplification. And that individuals are so complex, and what leads somebody to this place is so many multitude of factors, which means there's lots of points of intervention too. And so we kind of might look at it like there's risk factors. So there's risk factors in terms of traumatic experiences in childhood, in terms of family history of depression, diagnosis of mental illness, right? There's environmental triggers, biological, and then there's stressful events that happen. And we're going to talk about what some of those stressful events could be, maybe going through a divorce, losing a child, those types of things. And then you start to notice that, and this, we're talking about human beings here, right? So I'm presenting it in a linear fashion, but nothing's linear when we're talking about humans and complexity. And then you may start to notice mood changes. So this is where a lot of people were talking about today. People in your life, coworkers, loved ones, children, youth, yourself, start acting differently. It's like they're just not themselves. And it's not just like a day. We all have a bad day, but this is kind of going on, and they're doing things that they haven't typically done. We want to check in with that person. We want to get them connected. This is where we really want to have some kind of intervention. So if you go through a gatekeeper training, this is where we want to make sure that we're addressing. And I'm going to go into exactly how to do that in one of the next slides. And then there's access to means. So one of the things we always talk about is, does a person have a gun in their home? If someone has these risk factors, the stressful event, these mood changes, and they have an access to the way that they are going to die by suicide, their plan, if they have pills in their home, firearms is a huge one, that increases the chance that someone will take their own life. And that's a high risk. So means reduction is really, if you're having a loved one in your life and you're noticing that they seem more depressed, more down, you're getting them connected, anything in your home, if they live with you, or asking somebody, do you have a gun in your home? Is it locked up? Anything that, do they have pills? Those pills need to be removed. Anything that gets out of their way, because remember, you're not dealing with a brain that is really functioning in a healthy, firing in all type of cylinders. You're dealing with this brain that goes into a mode, a suicidal mode. And that's actually what inpatient does. Inpatient really, when someone is in a psychiatric crisis for a suicidal attempt or suicide thoughts or feelings, it's not really a ton of treatment. We're really trying to stabilize that individual to keep them safe, and then can start treatment, start medications if needed, start group therapy, but then really connect them to really address what just really happened to them. 90% of attempters who survive do not go on to die by suicide later. So it's not like, oh, there's no hope for that person. They want to do it, they're going to do it. Absolutely not. That's another myth, complete opposite. We also know that firearms used in youth suicide usually belong to a parent. And I know we're talking a lot about adults today, but to also throw in, I know Chris talked a lot about youth, is youth tend to tell each other. So, your teenager or a loved one's teenager is going to tell their best friend, typically not their parents. You may notice mood changes, which is hard to differentiate because I have 2 teenagers and my one son asked me if his sister's an alien, like daily, because they just act kind of differently, right? But they tell friends. That's why we need friends to also be gatekeepers. I had to throw this in here, and this is so important. Remember this: connection is protection. Connection is protection. We are in, and the Surgeon General just declared, the loneliness epidemic. Lacking connection is connected to so many health-related behaviors: heart disease, increased Alzheimer's, stroke, increased levels of stroke. And they compared it to premature death, smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So there's been a lot of discussion around this is a culture problem. And when I say loneliness, I mean connection, because you can be in a room, I think we've probably all heard this a lot, with 10 people and still feel lonely. It's connection that drives that. And when, youth and adults are feeling like they're getting that connection online, there's something missing. There's something really missing from that. Do you really know the individuals you're messaging or chatting with? Being in person with somebody, looking at their eyes, looking at their face, connecting to their nonverbals, that's powerful. That's connection. So connection is protection. If you're struggling, or anybody in your life, get connected. Find your people. Find the people that make you feel safe, make you feel heard. Find the people you can be silly with and be honest with about the real deal. I like to say to my friends, all right, what's the real deal? What's really going on? I don't want I'm busy, working a lot, kids are good, we're going to baseball. I can do those conversations, but when I'm with my friends, tell me what's really going on. I really want to know, because we all have this stuff going on. So just to go over some warning signs, the more clues and signs you observe, the greater the risk. We want to take it all seriously. These are some from a gatekeeper training. I'm a certified question, persuade, refer trainer. So this does not mean you're certified in attending this. This is just let you know that this does exist out there. So people have a lot of verbal cues. I've decided to kill myself. I wish I were dead. We don't say the word commit suicide, but sometimes people still do. It's not a crime. We say die by suicide. Language really does matter. I'm going to end it all. Or you'll hear people say, if something happens, if I lose my job, if my wife leaves me, if my husband leaves me, I'm going to kill myself. Take them seriously and watch your response to not just be like, no, you're not. You're all right. You don't really mean that, right? So we want to respond in a way that doesn't kind of give the person an out because we're anxious, or indirect cues. My family would be better off. I just want out. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. Behavioral cues. So look at these mood changes: depression, hopelessness, giving away prized possessions, unexplained anger, aggression, and also people who might be using, who have been in recovery and start using again. And then remember those kind of life events in that diagram that I showed you. So a huge change: being bullied at school, that's been going on really long, loss of a major relationship, a death of a loved one, anything that's pretty really significant life change that puts somebody who has all those other pieces at a more vulnerable risk. Someone who's struggling with financial challenges. If you hear people talking a lot about, it's a common belief in people who are in that place where they're thinking about taking their lives, that they're a burden, that they really do believe that they are a burden to others. And remember, suicide is about not wanting to suffer. It's about suffering. It's when someone's suffering is so bad that they cognitively convince themselves that people are better off without them, that they're all going to, not that they're just like not going to be okay, they're actually better off. And they believe that. They believe that as if you try to convince me I'm not wearing a gray sweater. So we want to intervene and disrupt that type of thinking. So here's what we could do. You can actually ask somebody, are you thinking of killing yourself? You can say those words. Are you thinking of taking your life? Use the word suicide, kill yourself. You know, you can say like, I've had times in my life where I felt really down and I've thought, you know, maybe I should kill myself, right? If that is something you've experienced, is how it's happening with you. So it's the way we say it. Or you can ask them like, have you been unhappy lately? Do you ever wish you could go to sleep and not wake up? And again, if you can't ask them, find somebody who can. So we don't want to say, you're just kidding about killing yourself, right? Or you're not really thinking about killing yourself. Because that's basically telling the person like, I really can't handle it. Please don't tell me. And then what we want to do is give them our whole attention. We want to persuade somebody to stay alive. Hey, we want to say, you matter. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you told me. We got this. I'm not leaving you. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get you connected. And listen, and we're going to offer hope. Well, a lot of people have felt this way and they're okay. You're going to be okay. We are going to do this together. And then we want to not leave that person and we want to connect them with help. Refer. And then I have this, like we have the 988 suicide and crisis line. You can take them to any psychiatric screening. You can take them to the emergency room. What about those that experience complex PTSD? Are they any bit more likely to attempt suicide? Yes. I think that with any increase in those vulnerabilities, we need to be aware of. So it's like when someone comes in to see us and we're doing an intake, if I know that someone has been dealing with PTSD and traumatic situations and complex trauma, which is trauma that kind of just goes on for years and years. It could be living in poverty. It could be, living in an urban area with a high crime rate. It could be those kinds of things. So let me just finish up right now. But yeah, those are all vulnerabilities and extra risk factors for individuals. So I'll stop. I know that was a lot of information, but I think the more we talk about this, the more we normalize that this is just part of the human experience. A lot of people have gone through this. People can survive and be okay. And just remember, connection is protection.
Great presentation, Stephanie. We need to think of ourselves, right, as those gatekeepers. And we can make a difference. When you were telling that story about the gentleman on the bridge and people walking by just looking at you like, what are you, crazy, right? And somebody not taking and not feeling that they can intervene or just not caring. I mean, I think as a society, we've just become so jaded and cold to things. We have to get sensitized again. We're desensitized as a society. And, it starts with each and every one of us sensitizing ourselves and putting ourselves present in the moment to understand what's going on around us, right? And then being part of any solution that we can. So thank you so much for sharing that overview with us. Hopefully none of us have to deal with it, but you know what? If we see something, say something and be that gatekeeper. So yeah. What a powerful, powerful program today. Thank you, Dr. Marcello. What a powerful program today. I want to thank all of the speakers who joined us today for what they do. Clearly, the work that they do each and every day impacts our communities, impacts our society, impacts our families, impacts our workforce, right? This is not easy work. My daughter's a mental health therapist, and I see the pain on her face some days by what she's dealing with recently. So for all of us, I think we got some great tips on our own self-help today, right? How can we clear the noise around us? It's incredible. I came into 2023 saying noise free in 23 and thought, new year, I'm gonna cut all this noise. It's really hard to cut the noise, folks, right? Do our best each and every day to intentionally decide what we want to have in our line sight and what we want to block out to help us stay focused. It is not easy. It is not easy at all. But thank you to all our speakers for your incredible presentations and for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you to all of you for joining us, for taking the time on these important issues, be it for yourself, for a colleague, for a family member, or for a community. We need you. And of course, I want to thank the incredible support of our partners. A shout out to all of those on the screen, 2 pages full. Without them, we can't do events like this. And finally, I want to thank the team at NJBIA who works tirelessly to put these programs together and to make sure that these programs are timely and relevant for the issues that are impacting us each and every day. So I wish everyone a wonderful day. The sun is shining. It is a beautiful day in New Jersey. Carpe diem, please seize it. All right, today and always. And NJBIA is here to continue to bring you resources any way we can. Thank you so much. Have a great day and be well, everyone.